Section 8 of Irish Idylls by Jane Barlow. This recording is in the public domain. Section 8. God save you, woman dear, what queerness should there be in it at all? Said Judy Ryan, looking vaguely disquieted. Why, sure you were always great at rememberin'. Often enough you've told us the same things afore now, and it's but natural. Just as if a body climbin' a wall 'ud be facin' about to look the way he'd come up, for the sake of a rest. And there's scarce a one, old or young, said Biddy Ryan, but has the feelin' they'd be ready for a good sleep at the day's end, river or no river. Sorra the queerness there's in that. The strongest great big bosthoon of a man that ever stepped, she averred, looking argumentatively at the little old woman, would be thinkin' of gettin' to sleep when he's tired. There's nothin' like it. Not but what to be sittin' aisy in the sun when you get the chanst this-a-way is mighty agreeable. Isn't it now, ma'am? Look at the light dancin' away yonder in the pool. You might say the water is thinkin' to churn itself into gould and silver." "Aye, aye, Biddy," said Mrs. Kilfoyle, not looking as far as the bright pool, "'tis all like a kind of pictur to me. But the warmth of the sun does me heart good, and the summerin' there is through it, same as if we had the old kettle sittin' on the hob." The noontide was indeed going by to an accompaniment of elfin clicking and creaking and whirring, kept up unintermittently on the glowing sward with its tenant grasshoppers and beetles and blue and red winged flies, and overborne by a droning boom as often as the dusty bee backed out of one freckled foxglove's purple-shaded cell and went murmuring to toil and swing in another. Butterflies cruised idly nowhere in particular on white sails or streaked with orange and scarlet, and mailed dragonflies poised and darted in vivid jewelled gleams. There was scarcely breeze enough stirring to whisk the fuzzy white wigs off the seeded dandelions, and up on the ridge of hill a hot air quivered against the rocks like a curtain about to rise. Lisconnel with its bog lay basking very wide and still, making the most of such a midsummer sun as seldom looks down upon us. Nothing happened to disturb its quiet perceptibly all the long morning. The neighbours had their dinner when the shadows were shortest, which was the most clearly defined hour of the day for them, now that the widow M'Gurk's old clock had given up even pretending to keep time. And when the turf cutters began again to pass leisurely to and fro, halting with their creels at the bank where the same group had reassembled. So when, well on in the afternoon, Brian Kilfoyle tramped over the hill into Lisconnel, he found everything there very much as he had left it. A grievous change had, however, come over his own frame of mind. He was in a sort of white heat, both physically and mentally, what with his long walk in the eye of the sun and his wrath and consternation. His look showed plainly that some untoward event had brought about his return surprisingly early, for no one had been expected to reappear in such very broad daylight. "She's lost it on us," he said, confronting his neighbours' interrogative faces with an ironical calm. "The price of the pig, every penny of it, that's all." "Och, man alive, don't say so," said his mother. "Saints and patience, however would she happen to go do such a thing?" said Judy Ryan. "You lie," said Mrs. Quigley, intending to politely convey sympathy mingled with amazement. "It's truth I'm tellin' yous," Brian said bitterly. "Sure, when we were about comin' on be the luck, sure, and the walk of the world we had, gittin' that far wid the ould divil skins of a hin that kep' her eye cocked to be flyin' out on us every step we went. 3 several times she got away wid herself, and had Mrs. M'Gurk almost kilt skirmishin' after her, meself bein' took up controllin' the pig. Sure they're the first thing I beheld was Norah and Nelly stoopin' down lookin' for we couldn't think what along the middle of the road. So says I to her, when we come up, 'Is it mushrooms you's a gatherin' there, woman?' says I, 'or maybe you'd politefully tell us whether you're weedin' a pitaty bed or walkin' to the town.' And wid that she up and began givin' me all sorts for not tyin' the corner of me ould handkerchief right, so as the money wouldn't ha' been slippin' out and goin' to loss along the road. For she'd carried it in her hand the whole way along, never let go of it for an instinct. And when she thought to be lookin' to see was it all right, and she comin' into the town, me sowl to the saints if the knot hadn't slipped and never a bawbee was there left in the blamed ould rag. As regardin' the tyin' now, I ha' been ready to take me oath anywhere, and so I told her I done it safe enough, but there, have it as you will, we've made a good job of it between the two of us, every farthin' gone." Here everybody pointed out, with slight verbal variations, that if 'twas along the road she'd lost it, he might have a great good chanst of gettin' it yet. Any person might be findin' it passin' by. "Sure I'm just after goin' over every step of it," he responded hopelessly, "and ne'er a trace any more than if they'd been meltin' hailstones. There was the 10 shilling bit, there's no size at all, it would roll away into nowhere. I'd never look to be seein' sight or light of it again. But I was thinkin' I might be good luck had hit on some of the silver and coppers. Divil a one. Howsomever, if I'd picked up so much as a couple of shillin's, mother jewel, I had got you your trifle of tay and sugar, begorra would I, whatever else might be takin' or lavin', for I think real bad of you bein' disappointed of it." "Lord love you, Brian Avic, niver go for to be troublin' your mind about any such a thing," piped Mrs. Kilfoyle. She had been in truth looking forward incredibly to the fragrant cups of hot tea with which it was an open secret that her son purposed to provide her upon acquiring capital. "I dunno that I've ever a fancy these times to be drinkin' tea at all." "Ah, dear, it's a terrible heavy loss on you, so it is, the both of yous, but plase God you might get it again. And anyways, man dear, there's the goat you'd 20 different minds about sellin'. She and a pair of the young hens 'ud mostly fetch you the price of a wee pig, so as you wouldn't be at the loss of a one for fattenin', wid all the waste pitaties comin' in. Sure you're dead beat, child alive, wid trampin' it in the sun's blazes. Sit down easy and be restin' yourself, or maybe you get a bit to eat first in the house." "But it's steppin' back I must be directly," said Brian, "and I have a couple of cold pitaties in me pocket here if I was wantin' anythin'. If I don't fetch home Norah, she and Nelly 'll be searchin' the road till this time tomorrow." "Ah, the crathur," said Mrs. Kilfoyle, "she's frettin' herself, you may depind. If you do a bad turn, be ever such an accident, you're the feelin' 'twas your own fault all the while, and it's cruel discouragin', for by bein' apart to start, you argufyin' and contendin'." Brian presently set out again through the rich afternoon light with his fallen fortunes. He felt but slightly consoled by his mother's suggestions, and dawdled on slowly, having no sense of a definite object to make him step out. After a while he sat down and ate his cold potatoes, in which likewise he found but little solace. Then, as drawing near Clayson's boreen, he was about to turn off the road and take a short cut across a soft bit of bog, just passable in dry weather, he became aware of somebody signalling to him on ahead. If the hour had been later, this might have seemed an alarming incident, but in the clear rays, where we scarcely believe much more than we can see, he at once discerned that it was merely Big Anne, clumping along heavily footed with her market basket. "I wonder to goodness gracious why the old woman can't set the flat of her feet to the ground like a Christian," he said to himself, while he went towards her, surveying her ungraceful progress with a censorious eye, his mood being attuned to miscellaneously adverse criticism, instead of stompin' that fashion, as if 'twas her notion to drive home a 2-inch nail with each step she took. "Have you got it yet, Brian, man?" she inquired as they met. Brian shook his head. "Nor never will," he said supplementarily. "Oh well, you won't be so," Big Anne said with confidence. "It's bound to be somewheres. 'Tisn't as if 'twas a pound note that might blow away on you. And here's your bit of tay and sugar," she continued, groping among the contents of her basket. "I thought if that was what you were goin' after, I'd save you a tramp." "Tay?" repeated Brian distractedly. "Tea? Sure, woman, what talkin' have you of tea, and I wid never the price of a hap'orth left me in creation. 'Twould be just borrying alone, like, till you can put your hand on your money again, and the mischief take the inconvenience 'twill be to me whativer. Troth, I don't rightly know what I wanted wid gettin' it at all, for Mad Bell she won't touch ever a drop of it, and it's poor work tay drinkin' when you have it all to yourself. Only me old pig went better than common, and I got hold of a little fellow Pat Ryan's bringin' along for me surprisin' cheap. So it seemed natural like to get a pound of tea. But then when Mrs. Brian told me how she was after meetin' the misfortin to mislay all the bit of money, thinks I to meself it might maybe come in handy for you, supposin' you weren't wishful to disappoint your poor mother of it this evening, and she belike wid her mind set on havin' a sup. Sure, Mrs. Brian was tellin' me she noticed her this mornin' early dustin' herself a couple of the cups and saucers, when she thought no one was mindin', to have them ready. Fit to cry your wife was too, poor woman, wid the notion she'd be vexed gettin' none. Though persuade her so I put me best foot forward, for afraid I'd miss you comin' back. Faith, there's a power of heat yet in that sun. 'Twould be just robbin' you downright, neither more nor less, if we'd take it off of you," said Brian, wistfully eyeing the dark purple parcels which Big Anne had by this time fished out of her basket. "Thank you kindly all the same, but I couldn't put it on me conscience to." A yell, suddenly let fast by interrupted them, and hurtling towards them over a wet tract of glistening pools came with kangaroo-like bounds, which terminated indifferently in land or water, a Rafferty gossoon. "Count it," he panted, thrusting something into Brian's hand. "We make it 17 and 4pence, and old Mrs. Kilfoyle says that's right. Who, Butterfingers, you've dropped 2 pennies. Faix, I needn't ha' run the feet off me legs if you only wanted it to sling about the road." "And where in the name of everything else did you get it at all?" said Brian, staring bewilderingly at his recovered wealth. "Lyin' in our window at home it was. Nannie's after findin' it just now, comin' in off the bog. They was sayin' you'd likely laid it down out of your hand somehow afore you started settin' out this mornin'. Be the piper, sure enough I was up there splicin' the handle of your mother's old basket, and it's just then I must ha' overlooked it. Och, murdher, and me standin' it out to poor Norah that I'd tied it up most particular in the handkercher corner, so as it hadn't a chanst to be slippin' out be any manner of means," I said. "So as it hadn't a chance to be slippin' out be any manner of means," I said. And that part of it was true enough. Bedad, she'll be for killin' me alive when she hears tell. But whether or no, I'm a proud man to have it back. I must be trottin' on to let her know it's got, for cryin' her eyes out to spirit the creature was the last sight I saw of her. So you perceive I've no call to be troublin' you now about the tea, ma'am, but I'm highly obligated to you all's one." "And what hour of the day or night might you be expectin' to get home then?" said Big Anne, still holding her rejected packets with a mortified air, for it's not far from sunsettin' this instant minute. And be the time you've got down to the town and bought your tea and all, and legged it back again wid Norah and little Nelly, that can't overhurry themselves, 'twill be fine and late. Bedad, it's not much tea your mother'll get the drinkin' of this night, if she's to wait for that. She's apt to be in her seventh sleep afore you come." Brian stood perplexed by conflicting wishes. He wanted to hasten on and relieve his wife's mind, and he wanted his mother to get her tea, and he wanted to have the pleasure of personally presenting it to her. However, the result of his deliberations was that he said, "Well then, if it wouldn't be to inconvenience you, ma'am, I'll ax you to leave it up at our house. She'll know all about it, and that would be what I'm owin' you, ma'am." He counted out the shillings and pennies upon the lid of her basket, and she swept them into it half reluctantly. "But I'm sure I'm much beholden to you, for if it wasn't only for you, me mother 'ad been disappointed of her bit of enjoyment this night anyway." He set off dog-trotting, and Big Anne said to the lad, "Bill, you spalpeen, you'll skite home a deal quicker than I'll be stumpin' it. Take the bit of tea and sugar along wid you, and leave it at Mrs. Kilfoyle's. Just slip it unbeknownst onto the table if nobody's in the house, and then when she comes in she'll be findin' it." And as she toiled stiffly along the far-stretching road, a flourish of legs and arms dwindling in front showed her that Bill was speeding on his errand. Up at Lisconnel, meanwhile, that golden afternoon quietude seemed to close over the perturbing incidents of the loss and recovery of the Kilfoyles' shillings as serenely as the still waters of a sun-shimmering lake close again over a fish's leap. The last ripple of excitement had so died away that the elders were at leisure to notice some slight symptoms of trouble which arose among an adjacent cluster of small children soon after Bill Rafferty had started in pursuit of Brian. They had been playing peaceably together for a long time in a grassy recess, young Kilfoyles and Quigleys and Ryans, but now some sounds of whimpering distress betokened a marring of harmony. "Arrah now, what's ailin' you childer?" inquired Judy Ryan, leaning forward to overlook them from the vantage of a rather higher perch. Whereupon Jim Kilfoyle's whimpering developed into a pronounced howl, while several of his companions replied shrilly, "Jim's after killin' a green beetle. He trod on it runnin' about and kilt it dead." "And what made him go for to do that?" said Judy reprovingly. "Sure they're dacint grey lookin' little things. If it had been any of them black beasts of Dowduff's, now they'd ha' been a raison in it. I'd put me foot on one of them meself fast enough, only 'twould make me flesh creep to go near it. I thought I was spyin' a sight of one stickin' his hideous head out between them two stones a while ago. Och!" Judy gathered her skirts about her shudderingly at the recollection. "I believe they're but innocent poor creatures all the while, if they have an ugly appearance on them," said Mrs. Quigley. "If they were twyste as innocent," Judy persisted, "I wouldn't touch one wid a 40-foot pole. And more betoken, I dunno where else they'd ha' got such a way of cockin' up their tails at you, unless they were a sort of divil." "I didn't go for to do it," Jim said, emerging temporarily from his remorse to vindicate his character. "It ran in right under me feet on purpose, when I was watchin' for it twinklin' in the grass, and I didn't know where it would be comin' to." "He was the greenest beetle I ever saw," said Rose Ryan, peering at the glitter of emerald shot with bronze and gold, which Katty Sheridan held ruefully in her palm. "Rael purty and shiny he was, that coloured look lovely in a string of beads." "And see now what come to him wid it, Rose," said her mother hortatively. Rising feminine vanity need never suppose that repressive morals will not be drawn for its behoof because it lives remotely in the far west and goes on bare feet in rags. Very belike he was that sot up wid thinkin' he was so green and shiny he didn't mind where he was goin', and there's how he got kilt. If he hadn't been runnin' about as if the whole place was belongin' to him, it might never have happened him at all." "Maybe if Danny O'Beirne was at home," speculated Joe Quigley, "he could ha' set it goin' again, same way as he mended up the inside of Widdy M'Gurk's ould clock. It wouldn't stir and nothin' lookin' to be ailin' it, till he gave it an odd poke or two to the wheels, and then it went on grand, and there's no great signs of anything broke in the beetle." "Och, but there's no life left in him whativer," pronounced Joe's brother, who had been warily experimenting with a daisy stalk, "or else he'd be wigglin' his legs like mad every time you tickle them." "His legs do be very black lookin', mind you," said Katty, who seemed to consider that this physical trait materially diminished the pathos of the situation. She dropped the creature down on the grass, and the regrets roused by its tragical fate subsided rapidly into oblivion. Only Jim, the perpetrator of the deed, sat still brooding over it beside the body of the slain, a prey to the limitless remorse of 5-year-olds. As the other children moved away from the place, he remained squatting in his dejected attitude so long that his grandmother was struck by it and said, "What ails Jim, I wonder, not to run about wid the others? He's apt to be gettin' sleepy." "He's liker to be frettin' yet about desthroyin' of the beetle," said Biddy Ryan. "Jim's unnatural took up wid beasts of the kind. His mother was tellin' me the other day he come into her some whiles wid his hands full of ladybirds and moths and such, and never one of them hurted. So he's apt to think bad of killin' anything." "Jim," said old Mrs. Kilfoyle, "I'm goin' in to mind the fire, and when I come out, will I bring you the old salt bottle to play wid a bit?" Jim's state of depression permitted him to nod only a joyless and disconsolate assent. Yet the loan of this article was generally a favour much in request. A relic of the mythical good old days, and the handiwork of Mrs. Kilfoyle's mother, it was a smallish glass bottle, to whose inner sides were mysteriously applied shreds of bright coloured fabrics, mostly bits of the apple green chintz which had made her own wedding gown. The bottle had then been tightly stuffed with salt, which threw out the brilliant hues on a pleasingly white and opaque background, and though now somewhat stained and discoloured by the damps of so many years, it still remained a precious heirloom in the Kilfoyle family, whose resources no longer commanded the production of decorative art. "Well, I'll bring it along wid me, honey," said Mrs. Kilfoyle, getting up and standing beside the child, "and if I was you, I'd just cover the poor beetle up comfortable under a scrapeen of moss or somethin' and let it be. I'd liefer he'd leave off bein' kilt and get skytin' about the same way he was before," said Jim reluctantly, accommodating himself to circumstances, and beginning to grub up a tiny velvet sod. "He does be that shinin' in the sun." "Maybe it might yet," said Mrs. Kilfoyle, "if 'twas left in peace and not interfered wid. It might ha' come to itself, and you might be watchin' it runnin' about again be next summer time. Sure, maybe 'tis no lie I'm tellin' him all the while," the little old woman soliloquised, as she went towards her shadowy doorway with its haze of clear blue smoke, "for it's nary I know what's gone wid the spark of plisure did be in the crathur." That night, not long before the rising of the moon, a great wing of feathery white, which had spread all athwart the sky at sunset, swept away to the east, and the stars, till then visible only glimmer by glimmer, blinking far up behind the drifting plumes, were seen to have mustered in one of their vastest assemblies. The numberless brilliance of their array attracted the notice of two wayfarers, who were walking along the bog road towards Lisconnel, so closely muffled by the rustling darkness round about that to the external world they seemed merely voices and footsteps. "They've a great old crop of stars up there this night," said one voice, "and twinkling fit to thrimble themselves out of their holes." "Aye," said the other, "I wish I'd as many shillin's in me pocket." "Talkin' of shillin's, I wonder did Brian Kilfoyle ever get the hantle of his money he was after losin' on the road?" "Och, yes he did, poor man, and a good job too. He's got troubles enough on him this minute widout any more misfortins." "Why, is there anything gone agin the Kilfoyles lately?" "Sure, didn't you hear tell? The ould mother's just died on him." "No, bedad, is it ould Mrs. Kilfoyle? Och, we're through the poor old woman. And what took her at all?" "Faix, I can't tell you. She'd just stepped indoors this evenin' to put her pot on the fire, and some of them comin' in a while afterwards, it's dead they found her there. Sure she was a wonderful great age entirely this long while back. The life was ready to flutter away out of her like the bit of down sittin' on a thistle in a waft o' wind. Eh, but Brian, poor man, he'll be woful put about. He was always thinkin' a heap of the ould mother. Sure, when I met him down below only this mornin', he was in the terriblest takin' at all, because he couldn't be bringin' her some little treat he'd promised her, be reason of losin' his bit of money. If he'd known but all, he needn't ha' been frettin' himself about that. But she got it, be good luck she got it, afore she went. And belike 'twill be a sort of satisfaction to Brian, and a consolement to his mind, that he done her the last thing he had the chanst to. For the time they found her, there she was sittin' with her old teapot on her lap that she'd reached off the shelf, and she'd the pound parcel of tay opened, as if she was intindin' to wet herself a drop. Och, now the creature to think of that. Whisht, me soul, whisht, man, what was that we heard?" "What was it? Nothin' but a plover pipin' over be the lough. 'Tis a powerful dark night, considerin' the sight of stars that are out on it. Howsomever, the moon'll be risin' afore you're home, bedad. There she is about gettin' up wid herself yonder, where the light strakes down, like as if you'd been scrapin' a match against a wall. So she is. Prisintly she'll be swimmin' up meltin' herself in the light like a bit of ice in clear water, same as she was last night, and then I'll pick me way back finely. Poor Mrs. Kilfoyle, heaven shine on her soul in glory. The dacint poor old body she was, and always wid a good word for every one. They'll be real annoyed to hear tell of it at our place, and you'll be missin' her many a day up at Lisconnel. It's a great opinion yous all had of her entirely. Faith, and we had then, little and big. But anyway, she's got the best of it over us. We'll do well enough if so be we've the luck to slip off as easy when we come to quittin'. Aye, will we, please God." Chapter 10. Coming and Going. The summer following Mrs. Kilfoyle's death was, what with one thing and another, a drearyish season at Lisconnel. That little old woman had left a great gap, and there came many long spells of gloomy bad weather, which seemed to beat people's troubles down upon them, as the damp drove the turf reek back through their smoke holes into the dark rooms, where they could not see how dense the blue haze was growing. Stacey Doyne's marriage also had removed something young and pleasant, and at times, when the thatch dripped without and within, neighbours were apt to talk about her in tones of commiseration, and say, "Sure her poor mother's lost entirely." So that towards autumn the distraction of some new resident's arrival happened rather opportunely. It was made possible by the fact that Big Anne had given up her holding and entered into partnership with Widow M'Gurk, thus leaving her late abode empty for another tenant. who appeared much sooner than anyone might have anticipated from the aspect of the cabin. Except as a fresh topic of conversation, however, the strangers gave small promise of proving an acquisition to the community. Lisconnel did not like their appearance by any means, and further acquaintance failed to modify unfavourable first impressions. These were mainly received in the course of the day after their arrival, which took place on a night too black for anything beyond a shadowy counting of heads, and a perception that the bulk of the newcomers' household stuff had jogged up on one donkey, and must therefore be small. A portion of Big Anne's furniture had remained behind her in the cabin, owing to certain arrears of rent. Her heart was scalded, she said, wid the prices she'd only get for her early chuckens, and they the weight of the world if you'd feel them in your hand. And poor Mad Bell, that'd mostly bring home a few odd shillin's wid her, was away since afore Christmas, and might never show her face there again, the creature, a bit of narration which would look funny enough in anybody's rental. Mrs. Quigley, who went to the door with an offer of a firelight, found it shut, and a voice inside said, "As unmannerly as you please." "No, we've matches," whereupon another voice further in the interior quavered, "Thank ye kindly." So she departed, little wiser than she had come. But daylight showed that the party consisted of an old man and his son, and his son's wife, and her sister, and 3 small children, besides some cochin china fowl, and a black cat with vividly green eyes. This much was apparent on the surface. Also that the old man was frail, bent, shrivelled, and civil-spoken, that the son was a big soft gomeril of a fellow, that both the women were sandily flaxen-haired, with broad flat cheeks and light eyes, that 2 of the children resembled them in an infantine way, and that the third, a girl a trifle older, was a dark-haired, disconsolate-looking little thing, with her face, Mrs. Brian said, not the width of a halfpenny herring, and the eyes of her sunk in her head. As for the fowl, there could be no doubt that their unnatural long flufferty legs were fit to make a body's flesh creep, and the cat looked as like an old devil as anything you ever witnessed, sittin' blinkin' atop of the turf stack. Other less self-evident facts came out by degrees, slower than might have been expected, as the strangers were generally close and chary of speech. They came from the north, where their affairs had not prospered. In fact, they had been sold up and put out of it, as the young man divulged one day to Brian Kilfoyle. They were a somewhat intricately connected family by the name, predominantly of Patman. The sister-in-law was Tishy M'Crum, which seemed simple enough, but the 2 light-haired boys were Greens, Mrs. Patman having been a widow, while the little girl was the child of a wife whom Tom Patman had already buried, for though he looked full young to have embarked upon matrimony at all, this was his second venture. "And it's a quare comether she must ha' been after puttin' on him," quoth Mrs. Quigley, "afore he took up wid herself. That's as ugly as if she was bespoke, and half a dozen year older than the young bosthoon, if she's a minute." It is true that at the time when Mrs. Quigley expressed this unflattering opinion, she and her neighbours had been exasperated by an impolite speech of Mrs. Patman, who had said loudly in their hearing, "Well, for certain, if I'd had a notion of the blamed little dog-hole he was bringin' us into, sorra the sole of a foot I'd ha' set inside it," and had been proceeded to congratulate herself upon having left all her decent bits of furniture up above at her mother's, so that she needn't be bothered with cartin' them away out of a place that didn't look to have had e'er a thing in it worth the trouble of movin', not if it stood there until it dropped to pieces wid dirt. Mrs. Quigley rejoined that it would be a great pity if any people stayed in a place that wasn't good enough for them, supposing all the while they knew of ever a better one. Maybe they might, and maybe they mightn't. It was wonderful to hear the talk some folks had wid every ould stick they owned an easy loadin' for Riley's little ass. But Judy Ryan, with a flight of sarcastic fancy, hoped that Mrs. Patman and her family were about going on a visit to the Lady Lieutenant, because it was much as if they'd find any place else where they'd be grandeur accordin' to their high-up notions. Skirmishes such as this, however, were a symptom rather than a cause of the Patmans' unpopularity. That sprang from several roots. For one thing, both the women had harsh, scolding voices, and it was even chances that if you passed within earshot of their cabin you would hear them giving tongue. Their objurgations were as a rule addressed to the young man or the old, the latter of whom presently grew into an object of local compassion, as a harmless, dacent, poor creature, while his son came in for the frank-eyed looking down upon which is the portion of an able-bodied man shrew-ridden through sheer supineness and poltroonery. But what Lisconnel often said that it thought better of was the stepmotherly treatment which seemed to be the lot of the little girl Katty. Of course the situation was one which under the circumstances would have made people believe in such a state of things upon the slenderest evidence. Still, even to unprejudiced eyes it was clear that Katty's rags were raggeder than those of her small step-brothers, and that she crept about with the mien of a creature which was conceived reasonable doubts respecting the reception it is likely to meet in society. When the autumn weather began to grow wintry, little Katty Patman, perishing about out there in the freezing wind, became a spectacle which was viewed with indignant sympathy from dark doorways whence she received many an invitation to step in and be warming herself. Her hostesses opined that she was fairly starved just for a taste of the fire, and didn't believe she was ever let next to or nigh it in her own place. Often, too, the consideration that she had no more flesh on her bones than a March chicken led to the bestowal of a steaming potato or a piece of griddle bread, but the result of this was sometimes unsatisfactory to the giver, Katty being apt to dart away with her refreshments, which she might presently be seen sharing among Bobby and Hughie, for whom she entertained a strong and apparently unreciprocated regard. "I wouldn't go for to be sayin' anythin' to set her agin them," Mrs. Brian remarked on some such occasion, "but goodness forgive me, I've no likin' for them two little brats. I mistrust them." "Ah, sure they've no sense," said Biddy Ryan. "Where would they get it? And the biggest of them I'd suppose under 4 years old." "Sense," said Mrs. Quigley. "Bedad then, if sense was all that ailed them, the pair of them is as cute as a couple of foxes. I mind a day or so after they'd been in it, I met the last one in the road, and I comin' wid be chance a sugar stick in me basket. So just to be makin' friends like, I gave it a bit for itself, and a bit for the other that I seen comin' along. Well now, ma'am, if it had took and eat up the both bits, I'd ha' thought ne'er a pin's point of harm. 'Twould ha' been natural enough to the size of it. But I give you me word, when it seen it couldn't get the two of them swallowed down afore his brother come by, what did it go do but clap the one of them into a crevice in the wall, and cover it over under a blackberry leaf, and wid that down it squats and begins sayin', 'Creely crawly snail, where's the creely crawly snail I'm after huntin' out of its hole?' lettin' on to be lookin' for somethin' creepin' in the grass, and a while after it came slinkin' back, when it thought nobody was mindin' to poke the bit out of the wall where I was gatherin' dandelions under the bank. So while I was fumblin' about missin' the right crivice, says I, poppin' up thinkin' to shame it, 'Maybe the crawly snail after eatin' it on you,' says I. 'Och yis, I seen it,' says the spalpeen, as brazen as brass. 'Gimme another bit instead.' There's a schemin' young rapscallion for you." "They're too like their mother altogether," said Judy Ryan. "The corners of their eyes do be as sharp as if they were cut out wid a pair of scissors. Not that I'd mind if they'd e'er a sthrake of good nature in them, but I misdoubt they have. The little girl now is as different as day and night. If she takes after a father, she's a right to want the wit powerful misfort'nit little imp," said Mrs. Brian. "For if he isn't a great stupid gomeral and an ass, just get me one. Why, if he was worth pickin' out of a dry ditch, he'd prevent of his own child bein' put upon." "Och, they have him frighted," said Mrs. Quigley, with a scornful emphasis. "They won't let him take an atom of notice of her, they're that jealousy. Sure he gets talkin' to her outside the house there. One of them'll let a bawl and send him off to be carryin' in turf and water. I've seen it time and again." "If he'd take and sling it about their ears some fine day, he'd be doin' right, and it might larn 'em to behave themselves," said Judy. "But the ould man would disgust you," said Mrs. Quigley, "wid the romancin' he has out of him about his son Tom. You'd suppose, to listen to him, that the omadhawn's equal never stepped. He'll deive you wid it till you're fairly bothered. Troth, he thinks the young one's doin' somethin' out of the way if he just walks down the street, and expects everybody to stand watchin' him goin' along. It's surprisin' the foolery there does be in people." "Och, murdher, woman alive," said Ody Rafferty, whose pipe went out at this moment, "there's no contentin' yous at all. It's too cute they are, and too foolish they are. Musha, very belike they're not so much off the common if you'd a trifle more experience of them. There's nothin' to match that for even in people. Bedad now, there's some people I know so well that I can scarce tell the one from the other." Lisconnel, however, generally declined to fall in with Ody's philosophical views, and the Patmans, whether suspected of excessive cuteness or folly, remained persistently unpopular. There was only one exception to this rule. The widow M'Gurk has a certain fibre of perversity in her, which sometimes twists itself round unlikely objects for no apparent reason save that they are left clear by her neighbours, and this peculiarity renders her prone upon occasion to undertake the part of devil's advocate. When, therefore, she had once delivered herself of the opinion that the newcomers were very dacint folks, she did not feel called upon to abandon it because it stood alone. As grounds for it, she commonly alleged that they were real hard working and industrious, which was obviously true enough, since Mrs. Patman and her sister might constantly be seen tilling their little field with an energy far beyond the capacity of its late tenant. Her neighbours' unimpressed rejoinder, "Well, and supposin' they are itself," did not in the least disconcert the widdy, nor yet their absence of enthusiasm when she stated that it was a sight to behold Tishy M'Crum diggin' over a bit of ground. She'd lift as much on her spade as any two men. As for little Katty, she'd never seen anybody doin' anything agin the child. It might happen by nature to be one of those little crowls of childer that'd always look hungry like, and pinin', the crathurs, if you were able to keep feedin' them with the best as long as the sun was in the sky. In short, something more than talk was usually needed to put the widow M'Gurk out of conceit with any notion she had taken up. Perhaps the comparative aloofness of her hillside cabin helped to maintain the Patmans at their original high level in her estimation. At any rate, they had not sunk from it by the time that they had been nearly 3 months in Lisconnel, and when Mrs. Patman and her sister were on terms of the very glummest civility with all the other women in the place. Even towards the widow M'Gurk they were tolerant rather than expansive. She said they done right enough not to be leapin' down people's throats. One morning, not long after Christmas, the widow, being bound on an errand down below, called in at the Patmans with a view to possible commissions. Meal was wanted, and while Tishy M'Crum stitched up a rent in the bag, Mrs. M'Gurk noticed, while little Katty, who had been took bad with a cold these 3 days, rustled uncomfortably among wisps of rushes and rags in an obscure corner. Fever made her bold and self-asserted, for she was wishing nothing less than that her daddy would get her an orange with yeller peel around it. Katty laid stress on this point, like the one her mammy got her a long time ago. And daddy'll be a good daddy and get her another now. And she'd keep a bit for Bobby and Hughie and all of them. A big yeller orange. Katty's eyes blazed with excitement as she reiterated these desires. "She's got an uncommon fancy for a one," said her daddy, looking wistfully from the child to his wife. "They have them down below," suggested the widow, "pence a piece." Mrs. Patman's hand was slipping towards her pocket. "If it was just for wunst," she had begun, when Tishy tweaked her sleeve viciously and interpolated a rapid whisper. "It won't be. There'll be no ind to it if you begin humourin' them." So the sentence was badly dislocated. "She'll do a deal better widout any such trash," said Mrs. Patman, and walked off to throw sods on the fire. Just then the widow became aware that old Joe Patman was grimacing at her from a corner fast by in a way which might have startled her had she not been familiar with such modes of beckoning. But when she obeyed his summons, what she saw astounded her outright, for Joe was stooping over a leathern pouch which he had drawn from a wall cranny, and which seemed to contain marvellous depths of silver money, with here and there a golden gleam among it, as he warily stirred it up, circling a hurried forefinger. She had only the briefest glimpse ere he shoved back the pouch and thrust a sixpence into her hand, muttering, "Git her an orange, don't be lettin' on for your life." As she turned away with a reassuring nod, she perceived that Tishy M'Crum was standing unexpectedly near and looking towards them over the top of the meal bag. Tishy was biting off a loose end of thread, which gave her a determined and ferocious expression, but whether she could have seen anything or not, the widow felt uncertain. She thought not. About 10 days after this, Mrs. M'Gurk was roused at a very early hour by a thumping on her door. When she opened it, she found some difficulty in recognising her visitor, as the dawn had scarcely done more than dim a few stars far away in the east, which is an ineffective form of illumination. "Whither now, Joe Pattern? Is it yourself?" she said peeringly. "And what's brought you out at all afore you can see a step or a stim? Is the little girl took worse?" For Katty's illness still continued, and had grown rather serious. "Sure no," said the old man. "Katty's just pretty middlin', but it's waitin' I've been the length of the mornin' till 'twould turn broad daylight before I'd be disturbin' of you, ma'am, to tell you the quare sort of joke they're after playin' on me down yonder." "Saints above, man, what talk have you of jokin' at this hour of the day or night?" said Mrs. M'Gurk, feeling the unseasonableness acutely as a bitter gust came swooping up the slope and indiscriminately ruffled the rime-dusted grass tufts and her old grizzled locks. "Och, be jabbers, it's a great joke they have agin me whatever," said old Patman, who was shivering much, with cold partly, and partly perhaps with amusement. "You see the way of it was, last night, no great while after we'd all gone asleep, I woke up suddint, like as if wid the creak of a door or somethin', but whatever it might be, 'twas slipped beyond me hearin' afore I'd got me senses right. So I listened a goodish bit, and somehow everything seemed unnatural quiet till I heard Katty fidgetin', and I went over to see would she take a drink of water. The Lord presarve us and keep us, ma'am, if all the rest of them hadn't quit, quit out of it they have, and left us clever and clean." "And now don't be romancin', man," said the widow remonstrantly. "What in the name of the nation 'ud bewitch any people to go rovin' out of their house in the middle of the black night, wid the frost thick on the ground?" "Quit they are," said the old man. "Tom's gone, and the wife, and every man jack of them. They've took the couple of chuckens I noticed, Tishy killin' of yisterday. Begorra, I believe they've took Tib the cat, for ne'er a sign of it I see about the place, that would be mostly sittin' cocked up on the dresser. Goodness guide us, sorra a soul there is in the house but the two of us, me and the child, and she's rael bad. It's a quare old joke." "It'd be a joke of a set of ravin' mad people," said the widow. "But the best of it is," he went on, "do you mind, ma'am?" He looked round him suspiciously and lowered his voice. "The leather pouch you might ha' seen me wid the other day?" "Oh," said Mrs. M'Gurk, "are they after takin' that on you? Sure, man, I thought you had it unbeknownst." "Aye, it's took," old Patman said, "but how she grabbed it I dunno, unless I was thinkin' be any chance you mentioned somethin' about it." "Divil a bit of me did," averred the widow, with truth which her hearer accepted. "And how much might you have had in it at all?" "Troth, I couldn't be tellin' you," he said. "I never thought to count it. 'Tis just for the pleasure to meself I keep it. This long while back I've put ne'er a penny in it, but when we used to be livin' up at Portnafoyle, I'd slip in the old shillin's now and agin, and sometimes I'd think 'twould be handy for buryin' me, and other times I'd think I'd give it to Tom as soon as I'd gathered a trifle more. Only some way the thought of partin' wid it 'ud seem to go agin me, and since poor Tom made a match with Martha M'Crum, 'tis worse agin me it goes." "'Tis that good for nought weasel of a slavin' Tishy's after conthrivin' it on me," quoth the old man, with a sudden spasm of resentment. "Tom 'ud never play such a trick. I mean it wasn't he invented the joke. He doesn't trouble himself much wid jokin'. He's too sensible and steady and perspicuous, and uncommon set on me and the child. There's no better son in Ireland. Och, but the rest of them mean no harm wid it. They're just schemin' to drop in presently and be risin' a laugh on me." Steps were promptly taken to verify old Joe Patman's strange story proved it to be correct in every particular. The only fresh fact which they brought to light was the presence of a 5-shilling piece lying on the dresser, where Joe had overlooked it in the early dusk. All the other inmates, chuckens and cat included, had disappeared, and with them most of the few movables, the old man and the sick child being left as forlorn fixtures. Lisconnel at large was neither slow nor circumlocutory in forming and expressing its opinion as touching the nature of the joke, a firm belief in which old Joe resolutely opposed to his troubles as they thickened around him. For no tidings came from the absentees, or were heard of them, while Katty's fever ran so high that it seemed likely he would be at small further charges on her account, a prospect which, however financially sound for a capitalist of 5 shillings or under, none the less filled his soul with grief. Then one night, when Katty was at her worst, a great gale came rushing and roaring across the bog, and when the day broke, it discovered the Patmans' brown thatch slope interrupted by a gaping crevasse, over which a quick plashing rain sheet quivered. The widow M'Gurk had less spare room than heretofore at her disposal now that she harboured a co-tenant, with a slight accession of tables and chairs. Yet she made out a dry corner for the child and her grandfather, who accepted these quarters in preference to any others, because the widow, whatever may have been her private views, was prevented by a mixture of contrariness and magnanimity from joining in the general denunciation of her former allies, compromising as were the circumstances under which they had elected to take their departure. In her society, therefore, he was not fain to overhear trenchant criticisms upon Tom's behaviour, and could dilate, at least uncontradicted, upon those gifts and graces in the young man which recent events had placed in some need of exposition. Other disquieting voices there were, however, which he could not dodge, and they spoke louder every day. For his 5 shillings were melting, dwindling, had vanished, and Lisconnel, with the best will in the world, could ill brook a burden of 2 incapables more laid upon its winter penury. No word on the subject had reached the old man's outer ears, but as Katty struggled slowly and fractiously towards convalescence, it became clearer in his mind that unless something happened she must, when well enough to be moved, seek change of air away at the big house. Perhaps this prospect was more constantly before him than even the thought of Tom's filial virtues as he sat drearily on the bank of Widow M'Gurk's door. He might often be seen to shake his head despondently, and then he was saying to himself, "Belike he thought bad of me keepin' the bit of money unbeknownst." By that time he had abandoned the joke theory, and fixed his hopes upon the arrival of a letter to explain the mysterious nocturnal flitting, and say whither they had betaken themselves after passing through Duffclane, the furthest point to which the detective forces of the district had tracked the party. Young Dan O'Byrne, whose work brought him daily up from down below to the forge half-way towards Lisconnel, had safely promised to convey this letter so far whenever it came, and on many a day the neighbours nodded commiseratingly to one another as they saw the old creature setting off with himself in quest of it. The prompt January dusk would have already fallen before he struggled up the Knockawn, to be greeted by the widow in the tone of marked congratulation which our friends sometimes adopt when all reason for it conspicuously absent. "Well, man alive, there wouldn't be e'er a letter in it this day anyway." "Och, to be sure, not at all," he would answer cheerfully. "I wouldn't look to there bein' e'er one sooner than to morra. I hadn't the notion of expectin' a letter whatever. 'Twas just for the enjoyment of a bit of a walk I went." "Why, to be sure it was. But be comin' in, man, for you're fit to drop, and be gettin' your old brogues dried. Och, man, you're drownded entirely. 'Tis a mighty soft evenin' it's turnin' out. And here's Katty lookin' out for you this great while," Big Anne would say. "She's finely this night, glory be to goodness." Affairs were much in this posture when the widow was one day perplexed by the occurrence of 2 small incidents. In the first place, as she was starting on an expedition to the town, she saw at a little distance something running across the road which looked uncommonly like the Patman's black cat Tib. Lisconnel owns no other cats for which she might have mistaken it. Still, as she was puzzled to look how the creature should have hidden itself away for more than a fortnight, she concluded that she had been deceived by some fluttering bird or glancing shadow. In the next place, she happened in the town upon one Larry Donnelly, who in the course of conversation remarked, "So you've that young Patman back wid yous agin. What took him to be leggin' off wid himself that way?" "And what put that in your head at all?" said the widow. "Light nor sight we've seen of him, or a one of them, or likely to. It's off out of the country he is belike, and he after robbin' his old father, that never done talkin' foolish about him, and leavin' his innocent child to go starvin' into the Union. Bad luck to him." She found a free expression of her sentiments rather refreshing after the restrictions under which she was placed at home. "Well now," said Donnelly, "I'd have bet me pair of best brogues I seen that chap a couple of nights ago streelin' along the road down about our place. but 'twas darkish enough, and I might aisy be mistook." The widow pondered much over this statement on her homeward way, but had the forbearance to say nothing about it. She was still undecided whether or no she would communicate it to anybody, when next morning, on her way for a can of water, she saw the black cat, unmistakable this time, run across the road, and, as the day before, make off over the bog towards the little river. Widow M'Gurk stood staring after it for a few minutes, and came to a resolution. Then she looked about her, and was aware of Andy Sheridan's head leaning against his doorpost. Of Andy her opinion was, as we have seen, rather low, but she could descry no other person available for her purpose, so she called to him: "Andy, lad, I'm goin' after me two pullets that's strayed on me. Come and be giving me a hand." Andy lounged over to her good naturedly, and they turned into the bog, where Ody Rafferty presently joined them. The widow thought her fowl might be among the broken ground where the stream runs at the back of the knockawn, and the three went in that direction. It was a mild, soft, grey morning, and they met with neither stir nor sound, till they came abruptly upon a grassy hollow, shut in by furzy banks, and fronted by the running water. And then the widow, who alone had been expecting the unexpected, uttered a suppressed screech, and said: "Och, boys dear, goodness gracious guide us." Section 8